Mossad, Part 1, Origins and First Missions. Have you heard of the Mossad? An agency so quiet that by the time its name is whispered, it is already too late. While the world sleeps, its operatives move in the dark, eliminating targets, gathering intelligence, tipping the scales of history without a single headline. This is the story of how Israel, ringed by neighbors who openly vowed its destruction, built one of the most feared intelligence networks on the planet, an organization that did not merely defend borders. It rewrote the rules of modern espionage, operating across continents, infiltrating hostile governments, and carrying out missions that sound like Hollywood scripts except they are real. The story begins in 1948, when David Ben-Gurion declared the independence of Israel. The newborn state was attacked within hours. Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq advanced simultaneously. The country was surrounded, outnumbered, with few reliable allies. The UN had proposed partition. The Arab states rejected any solution that recognized a Jewish state. Survival was not a political option. It was an imperative. Ben-Gurion understood that conventional weapons and conventional armies alone would not guarantee survival. Israel needed information, precise, silent, ahead of the enemy. It needed to know everything about its foes before they knew anything about Israel. From that raw need, in the chaos of war, the embryo of the Mossad was born. At first, Israeli intelligence was a patchwork. Shin Bet handled internal security. Military intelligence focused on the battlefield. But something crucial was missing. An agency capable of operating beyond borders, inside enemy territory, in the corridors of global power, an agency that could conduct operations governments would never admit. In December 1949, Ben-Gurion set up the Central Institute for Coordination. In 1951, it was renamed the Institute for Intelligence and Special Operations, Mossad. The name was deliberately dull, almost bureaucratic, an institute. No dramatic initials, no intimidating acronym. But behind that administrative veil, a machine was taking shape that would ignore the conventional rules of espionage. Ronen Shiloah, the first director, established three principles that would define the Mossad: plausible denial, absolute compartmentalization, and unquestioning loyalty to the State of Israel. Operatives would have no public identities. They would not step onto podiums to receive medals. Many would die, and their families would never know exactly what they did. It was a Faustian bargain. Surrender the self so the collective might survive. In the early years, Mossad pursued two core missions. First, clandestine immigration, bringing Jews out of hostile lands and into Israel. Second, mapping the military capabilities of neighboring Arab states. Agents were planted in Egypt, Syria, Iraq, posing as businessmen, journalists, sometimes passing as locals. Some built false identities for years, married, had children, all to preserve cover. Patience was an operational virtue. Haste killed. Mossad learned to wait. Then came the 1960s, and with it an operation that would announce the agency's reach to the world. The man at the center was Adolf Eichmann, the logistics architect of the Holocaust, the bureaucrat who organized trains to death camps. Eichmann was alive, comfortable, in Buenos Aires, using a false name, holding a factory job, living a bland suburban life. His routine was predictable. He took the same bus every day. The Mossad watched. Extradition was tempting but dangerous. Argentina harbored many ex-Nazis. An official request would tip Eichmann off, and he would vanish. Military assault on Argentine sovereignty was out of the question. Only one option remained: a clandestine kidnapping on foreign soil. The mission, called Operation Garibaldi in public reports, and in the field, simply bringing the monster home, was painstaking. 11 agents, safe houses, unremarkable cars, forged papers, a plan of brutal simplicity. Seize Eichmann when he stepped off his bus, sedate him, hold him in a safe house for days while preparing false documents, then smuggle him out disguised as a member of an Israeli delegation. Timing had to be flawless. Minutes would decide the difference between success and an international crisis. On a May evening in 1960, agents moved. Eichmann was intercepted, silenced, bundled into a car, driven away in less than a minute. He was kept in a safe house, bound to a bed, interrogated until his identity was certain. Dental records, scars, answers to private questions all confirmed the man. He confessed, offering the chilling defense of orders followed without remorse. Forged identity, sedation, a uniform, an El Al flight, and Eichmann crossed the Atlantic. When he woke in a Jerusalem cell, the world reeled. Argentina protested. The United Nations condemned the violation of sovereignty, but Israel had its man. The trial that followed forced the world to confront the full machinery of genocide. The operation set precedent. Mossad would operate where necessity demanded, unfettered by borders or permission. The message was clear: existential threats to Israel or the Jewish people would be neutralized. End of discussion. That stance produced equal measures of awe and fear. Allies admired Israel's effectiveness but bristled at covert actions on their soil. Adversaries tightened their defenses. Meanwhile, Mossad kept refining its craft. Decades that followed would see it move into deeper infiltration, technological sophistication, and recruitment networks that rivaled other global services. One of Mossad's most potent techniques was human intelligence, recruiting insiders within enemy states. The agency specialized in identifying vulnerabilities, indebted officials, diplomats with extramarital scandals, disillusioned scientists. Approach was never blunt. It was subtle, surgical, an offer that could not be refused. Over time, Mossad combined patient human tradecraft with daring field operations, and the result remade intelligence practice. Mossad Part 2, a spectacular operations and Cold War triumph. By the mid-1960s, Mossad's portfolio expanded from clandestine rescue to strategic operations that changed battlefield equations. One headline episode, the acquisition of a Soviet-made MiG-21 from Iraq. Israel's adversaries were flying the same aircraft. There was no legal way to study the plane. Mossad began a long recruitment campaign for a pilot willing to defect. Years passed before they identified Muna Redfa, an Assyrian Christian in the Iraqi Air Force who felt marginalized. The approach was patient: asylum, money, a new life. He accepted. On a training flight in August 1966, Redfa diverted his MiG-21, flying low and under radar, into Israeli airspace. Israeli defenses had been warned, otherwise the plane might have been shot down. The jet landed in secret. Engineers disassembled it, learned weaknesses, weapon system limitations, vulnerabilities. When the Six-Day War erupted in 1967, Israeli pilots faced MiG-21s armed with intimate knowledge of the jet. Air superiority that month owed as much to intelligence as to pilot skill. That war, and the intelligence that preceded it, demonstrated a core truth: precise information can be the deadliest weapon. Mossad agents mapped air bases, ammo dumps, artillery positions across Egypt, Syria, Jordan. When Israel launched its preemptive strikes on June 5, 1967, the targets were known. Arab air forces were destroyed on the ground within hours. The territorial gains were enormous, but so was the political fallout. Victory did not mean peace. It prepared the ground for future conflicts. Come 1973, the story changed. On Yom Kippur, Israel's most sacred day, Egyptian and Syrian forces launched a coordinated surprise offensive. Initially, Israel suffered catastrophic losses. Intelligence failures were exposed. Signals that might have indicated imminent war were interpreted as routine exercises. The lesson was brutal. Intelligence without correct interpretation is useless. Israel recovered militarily, but the toll was high. Thousands of lives lost, national trauma, and bitter introspection about how the system had failed. The response went beyond internal reform. The shock of Munich in 1972, terrorists murdering Israeli athletes, pushed Israeli leadership toward a new doctrine of deterrence. Those who orchestrated such attacks would be hunted, not waited on. The result was an operation that became known as Wrath of God, a global assassination campaign targeting members of organizations that had struck at Israeli civilians. The targets were spread across cities: Beirut, Rome, Paris, Athens. The teams assembled were not ordinary soldiers. They were specialists in infiltration, surveillance, and clean elimination. Some missions were ruthless in their efficiency. Operatives tracked a suspected coordinator in Rome and executed him outside a cinema. Others were surgical and technical. A bomb hidden inside a phone, timed to detonate at a moment of certainty. The message was unmistakable. Distance was no shield. Anonymity was not safety. But such campaigns also carried risk and moral hazard. Not every mission succeeded. In Lillehammer, Norway, in 1973, Mossad teams mistakenly killed an innocent man, Ahmed Boukiki, a Moroccan waiter, while hunting a Munich conspirator. The error was catastrophic. Norwegian authorities arrested several agents, and the operation became an international scandal. Mossad's methods were exposed and criticized. Governments that had winked at shadow work suddenly demanded accountability. Wrath of God was temporarily suspended and tactics revised. The episode was a stern reminder. Even the best intelligence services are fallible, and when they fail, innocents die. As the decades passed, Mossad diversified. The Cold War context offered new targets and new tools. Spycraft moved beyond human agents into technical and technological arenas. In the 1990s and 2000s, a new battlefront opened, the digital domain. The agency recruited hackers, mathematicians, and software engineers. Cyber capabilities became critical. A quiet war unfolded, one that could disable centrifuges, corrupt databases, and reshape nuclear timelines without a single missile. The world first became aware of one such digital weapon in 2010. A sophisticated computer worm infected nuclear facility control software and caused centrifuges to spin beyond safe limits, a silent sabotage that set back a nuclear program by years. No government publicly claimed responsibility, but analysts traced fingerprints consistent with a collaboration of state-level cyber expertise. The message again was clear: sabotage can be surgical and deniable, and the modern battlefield includes lines of code as lethal as bullets. OSSAD Part 3, Risk Rescue, Revelations and Legacy. If the MiG-21 taught the value of technical intelligence, if Wrath of God taught the cost of revenge, some operations fused intelligence and daring into feats the world would not forget. Entebbe, 1976. A hijacked Air France Airbus with more than 200 passengers was forced to land in Uganda. Most hostages were released, 106 were held. The hijackers and their Ugandan patrons threatened mass executions. Negotiations seemed to reward terror. Acquiescing would invite more kidnappings. A military rescue looked impossible. Entebbe sat 4,000 kilometers from Israel, deep in hostile territory, protected by local troops. Mossad's role was decisive. Agents located an Israeli airport engineer who had built parts of Entebbe's terminal years before. He had the lay of the land. Other sources mapped troop dispositions, the positions of hostages, the patterns of the hijackers. On July 3rd, Israeli C-130s flew low across Africa, refueled, and landed under the cloak of night. Commandos stormed the terminal in a calibrated burst of violence, less than an hour to free the hostages and depart. Though 3 were killed and 1 Israeli commando later died of wounds, the operation was a global shock. Intelligence and action married into a rescue that would be replayed for generations. The Mossad of recent decades adjusted to new threats. Terrorist structures mutated into decentralized, cell-based networks radicalized online. Financial flows moved through cryptocurrencies. Social platforms radicalized individuals in isolated corners of the world. In response, Mossad developed units for social media monitoring, infiltrated extremist forums, traced funding flows, and adapted tradecraft to a networked age. The core objective remained unchanged: detect and stop existential threats to Israel. Iran became, and remains, a central focus. The prospect of a nuclear-armed Iran altered strategic calculations across the region. Open war promised catastrophic consequences. Covert measures became the alternative. A campaign of quiet sabotage, targeted killings of scientists, and cyber intrusion aimed to slow and disrupt nuclear progress. Between 2010 and 2012, several key scientists associated with nuclear programs died under mysterious circumstances: explosives, sniper shots, poisonings. Iran accused Israel. Israel offered strategic silence. The implication was obvious. Involvement in the program carried lethal risk. In 2018, Mossad revealed another facet of its reach. Agents reportedly penetrated a warehouse in Tehran and removed a trove of documentation detailing a covert nuclear program, thousands of pages and digital files that undermined Tehran's claims about having halted weapons work. The operation required years of patient human infiltration, local recruitment, technical sabotage of security systems, and flawless exfiltration. When the material surfaced publicly, it triggered shockwaves, evidence on paper and disk that contradicted official denials. The theft demonstrated not only audacity but the painstaking, patient craft of intelligence operations. Throughout its history, Mossad has also relied on partnerships, sometimes improbable. In recent years, discreet cooperation with certain Gulf intelligence services has grown. Shared concerns about arising Iran-aligned interests. Saudis, Emiratis, and Israelis now trade quiet intelligence, a muted realpolitik that would have been unthinkable decades earlier. These alliances operate in the zones where public diplomacy cannot tread: quiet data sharing, coordinated operations, and mutual logistical support. What of the people who make it happen? Mossad's recruitment and training are legendary. Talent is spotted early, often during mandatory military service. Candidates are assessed for mental resilience, emotional stability, linguistic ability, and the capacity to act under pressure. Psychological testing is rigorous. Only a fraction are selected for field training. Those who pass enter a multi-year course: languages, surveillance and counter-surveillance, disguise, hand-to-hand combat, weapons, resistance to interrogation, and cryptographic communications. The life of an operative is rarely glamorous. It is long hours of tedium and stress, years of living lies, relationships sacrificed, and the ever-present risk that identity will be lost to duty. The agency's structure is specialized: divisions for intelligence collection, covert operations, special tasks, psychological warfare, and technological development. Stations operate in dozens of countries, often under diplomatic cover, but with significant autonomy. Recruits are both Jewish and non-Jewish, Israelis and foreigners. Identity matters less than skill and loyalty. The ethos is simple: survival of the nation justifies hard choices. 7 decades in, Mossad remains partly myth and partly cold reality. Many files are still classified. Some operations will never be publicly acknowledged. Agents who died under false names lie in unmarked graves. When secret archives are pried open, the public learns that life can be more cinematic than fiction. What remains undeniable is the paradox at the heart of the story. A tiny nation, surrounded by threats, constructed an intelligence service of global reach and uncanny capability. It is a saga of sacrifice and moral ambiguity. A catalog of missions that saved lives and missions that took them. The moral questions: when is assassination justified? What price do we pay for preemptive security? How many innocents may fall to mistaken identity will accompany the narrative forever, but facts are facts. The Mossad created tools and methods that shaped modern intelligence. The blend of human assets, surgical operations, and technological sabotage. The willingness to act decisively abroad. The patient cultivation of sources. The fusion of old-fashioned tradecraft with cutting-edge cyber tools. That combination made it effective and feared. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. If you found this account compelling, consider subscribing and supporting the channel. Your support helps bring more deep investigations like this into the light, unpacking stories that shape our world, told with the intensity and clarity they deserve. Which operation surprised you the most? Leave a comment with your city and country. I want to know where this story reached you.